F1's budget cap, the rule that changed everything. Formula One was once the playground of financial giants, a place where money decided who conquered the track. In the Schumacher-era, teams could spend without limit, unleashing technological armies to crush rivals. Today, the same sport forces teams to count every sandwich at the catering table. The budget cap has redrawn the battlefield, changing how champions are built, how teams survive, and how Formula One itself defines greatness. The Wild West of spending, Schumacher's Ferrari era. The early 2000s marked an age of unrestrained power in Formula One, when Michael Schumacher and Ferrari towered above the rest. Back then, there were no budget caps, no financial guardrails, and no serious restrictions on testing. If Ferrari wanted to run their cars for thousands of laps at Fiorano or Mugello, they did it without hesitation. Engineers worked in shifts around the clock, developing new parts weekly, sometimes daily, with the resources of a small army. Money wasn't an issue. It was the weapon that secured their dominance. Rivals like Williams and Renault tried to keep pace, but the gulf was unbridgeable. Ferrari's might wasn't just in Schumacher's unmatched talent, it was in the fact that they could outspend anyone into submission. The sport became less about driver duels and more about which team had the deepest pockets. While the Ferrari dynasty dazzled fans and showcased engineering brilliance, it also revealed a growing imbalance that threatened the very soul of Formula One. Schumacher's 5 consecutive championships were historic, but they also highlighted how unchecked financial power had tilted the grid, leaving smaller teams invisible in the shadows. The rise of super teams and the collapse of competition. Ferrari's model of dominance didn't remain theirs alone. Soon, McLaren, Renault, and eventually Red Bull adopted the same formula: massive budgets, unlimited testing, and relentless development cycles. What followed was the rise of super teams, organizations with resources so vast that the rest of the field became little more than moving obstacles. Wind tunnels ran non-stop, CFD programs consumed limitless computing power, and elite engineers were hired in droves. Smaller outfits like Minardi, Arrows, and Jordan were forced to scrape by, often struggling just to put 2 cars on the grid. The disparity became painful to watch. Races were increasingly predictable, championships often a 2-horse race before the season even began. The gap wasn't only on the stopwatch, it was existential. Super teams dictated not just performance, but survival itself. Sponsors gravitated toward giants, while underfunded squads lived on borrowed time. Formula One, once a battleground for ingenuity and courage, became a high-stakes spending contest. For fans, the loss of unpredictability was deflating. For teams on the edge, the reality was cruel. Talent, creativity, and passion weren't enough without millions in the bank. Formula One risked collapsing into exclusivity, a sport for corporations rather than competitors. A sport on the brink. Why the cap was needed. By the late 2000s, the consequences of financial excess became unavoidable. Teams folded under the crushing weight of unsustainable costs. Caterham, HRT, and Manor disappeared, their dreams suffocated by debts. Force India staggered from one crisis to another, surviving only through last-minute rescues. The sport's proud image as the pinnacle of motorsport was eroding, as grids shrank and fans began questioning whether competition still meant anything. Sponsors hesitated to commit, unwilling to back underdogs destined to fail. Even manufacturers felt the strain. The costs of fighting at the front became astronomical. Without intervention, Formula One faced a bleak future, 3 or 4 super teams monopolizing the grid. The FIA finally stepped in, recognizing that survival required sacrifice. A budget cap was drafted, not as a gentle guideline, but as a lifeline. It was designed to cut costs, protect smaller outfits, and restore competitiveness. Critics warned it would limit innovation, but the alternative was clear: financial collapse. The cap wasn't just about balancing books, it was about preserving the sport's identity. Formula One could no longer be a game of unchecked spending. To endure, it had to become a contest where efficiency and ingenuity mattered as much as money. Enter the budget cap, a new era of restriction. In 2021, Formula One crossed into a new age, the budget cap era. Teams were limited to $145 million per season, a figure gradually reduced in subsequent years. For giants like Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull, accustomed to spending double or even triple that figure, it was a seismic shock. The days of endless prototypes, lavish travel arrangements, and unchecked staff numbers were over. Every financial decision became a trade-off. Introduce a new aerodynamic package, and then another project might need to be delayed. Fly in upgrades overnight. That meant cutting elsewhere. For the first time, accountants stood alongside engineers as key players in success. Smaller teams welcomed the change, finally able to compete on more balanced terms. The FIA introduced strict auditing measures, threatening penalties for those who strayed beyond the line. The aim was simple: stop the financial arms race that was killing the sport. Whether loved or hated, the cap forced everyone to play under the same rules. Formula One was no longer a playground for the wealthiest. It had become a carefully regulated contest where every dollar carried as much weight as every tenth of a second on track. From unlimited testing to simulator reliance. One of the most dramatic changes under the budget cap was the death of unlimited testing. In the Schumacher-era, cars ran endlessly, pounding circuits to find perfection. Today, restrictions on track testing and financial constraints have forced teams into a new frontier: simulation. Advanced simulators and computational fluid dynamics now replace thousands of physical laps. Engineers model airflow digitally, trial parts virtually, and rely heavily on data, long before a car ever touches asphalt. Wind tunnel hours are capped, forcing choices about which developments to prioritize. Teams can no longer test endless variations of front wings or suspension systems. They must pick their battles carefully. The driver's role in development has shifted too. Instead of marathon test sessions, drivers spend hours inside simulators, giving feedback on software models rather than real tarmac. While this has advanced digital technology, it has also stripped away some of the raw trial and error that once defined Formula One's grind. Now, precision and efficiency matter more than brute force. The sport has moved from sweat-soaked Fiorano marathons to sterile simulator rooms. The fight for perfection continues, but the tools and the philosophy behind it have changed forever. Counting pennies, when catering costs make headlines. Perhaps the most surreal illustration of the budget cap's impact lies in its reach beyond the car itself. Under the rules, almost every operational expense is included: staff wages, logistics, spare parts, and even catering. The spectacle of Formula One, once defined by extravagance, now finds itself reduced to debates over food bills. In 2022, the controversy surrounding Red Bull's budget overspend sparked headlines that included references to catering costs. Sandwiches, once an afterthought, suddenly became a symbol of financial scrutiny. Accountants now pore over travel receipts, meal plans, and hotel invoices, ensuring every detail fits within the cap. Engineers still chase performance gains, but administrators chase savings with equal intensity. For teams that once operated like royalty, the adjustment has been humbling. Extravagant hospitality suites and limitless buffets gave way to tight calculations. Formula One, once mocked for excess, is now bound by rules that force discipline down to the smallest details. The fact that catering budgets became part of public debate shows just how radically the sport has shifted. Racing glory is still decided on track, but balance sheets have become just as critical. The budget cap made extravagance impossible and accountability unavoidable. The legacy: leveling the playing field or stifling innovation. The budget cap has transformed Formula One, but its legacy remains fiercely debated. On one hand, it has preserved the survival of smaller teams, creating closer battles across the midfield and giving underdogs like McLaren, Aston Martin, and Alpine new hope. The days of multi-second gaps between the front and back of the grid are shrinking. For fans, unpredictability has returned, with shock podiums and tighter races. On the other hand, critics argue the cap has clipped the sport's wings. Formula One was once a laboratory of limitless innovation, where billion-dollar experiments drove breakthroughs that filtered into road cars. Now, some fear that constraint breeds caution rather than creativity. Yet without limits, the sport risked collapse, becoming nothing more than a corporate exhibition. The cap has forced ingenuity within boundaries, rewarding efficiency rather than extravagance. Formula One has become as much a test of financial discipline as engineering brilliance. Whether this is salvation or restriction depends on perspective, but one truth remains: the sport will never return to its unchecked past. The budget cap has redefined Formula One forever, changing not just how teams race, but what it means to compete at the pinnacle of motorsport. Formula One has always been about pushing limits of technology, of drivers, of imagination. Yet, the budget cap forced the sport to confront a new kind of limit: money. Gone are the days of endless testing, unchecked armies of engineers, and dominance bought with blank checks. Today, success is measured not only in tenths of a second, but in the discipline to stay within financial boundaries. Some see it as salvation, others as a cage. But whether loved or hated, the budget cap has changed Formula One forever. It rescued teams from extinction, leveled the battlefield, and reminded fans that competition is not just about speed, it's about survival. The era of extravagance is gone. In its place stands a leaner, sharper Formula One, where every dollar counts as much as every lap.